Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to paint this misty boat using watercolor and then some colored pencil highlights. If you would like a real-time version of this tutorial, you can find it up now in Critique Club. I'll put a link in the video description. It's only $5 a month and it gives you access to 90 real-time long version tutorials that will walk you through step-by-step of more complex art techniques, as well as monthly creative prompts and the ability to share your artwork with me for personalized feedback. So go check that out in the video description if you think that would be useful to you. I'm starting off by sketching right directly on my watercolor paper. If this makes you uncomfortable, you can always sketch on some scrap paper, like regular old copy paper, and then use some transfer paper to put that onto your watercolor paper. You could also print out the reference photo, which is from Unsplash, and you could trace it using a light box if that's more comfortable to you on a single sheet of paper. I really enjoy sketching, so I just decided to go for it right on my good paper. Now I am drawing fairly darkly, and here's a trick. I'm drawing darkly so you can see it. If you have a hard time seeing light lines when you sketch on your paper, use a softer pencil. Now it might be a little nerve-wracking to see those dark lines on your paper, but if you use something like an 8B, any pencil that's got a B in the name is going to be darker. And because you don't have to use a lot of pressure to draw with those pencils to get a dark line, I find that you can erase them pretty easily too if you decide that that line's too dark for your liking. But I like to do it because when I'm filming, sometimes it's hard to see my lines for my students, so this just makes it a little bit easier. And I'm using one of the matte black pencils that I recently purchased in a Faber-Castell set because I want to kind of get used to them a little bit more because I haven't used them that much, and I've been kind of disappointed in them. So I'm hoping that I can, find some good redeeming qualities for them. I think it's just I haven't given them enough time. Anyway, I'm using my M. Graham watercolors in my Big Studio palette, and I am mixing up some. I took some ultramarine blue and some cerulean blue, and I added a little bit of burnt sienna to that. I also have a little bit of yellow ochre and burnt sienna on the side, so I can pull into that as needed. The water is not very colorful in the background, and those colors tend to granulate too, so you don't have to go buy special super granulating colors to get that effect in your artwork. You just need to identify what colors in your palette will naturally granulate. Generally, any color that's made with a cobalt, an ultramarine, oftentimes your earth tones will have some granulating abilities too, and this is because those are sedimentary colors. Those are the colors that sit on top of your paper rather than soak in and stain your paper. So your colors like phthalos and quinacridones, those really vibrant colors, their pigment particles are so finely ground that they will seep in and stain your paper. These other paints that I mentioned, the ones that are made from minerals or more earthy toned pigments, rocks basically, or synthetic minerals like that, they are chunkier pigments, and they will settle out of the washes and sit on the paper, and that's why you get that granulating effect. And depending on how coarse they're ground is how it also affects the color, but it's also whether or not they're gonna split apart and give you that wonderful texture or not. But the best thing to do is to experiment with what you already own and see what your pigments can do, and then adding onto those if you find that it would be more useful to have a few colors that are specifically granulating. Like these little full pans I'm holding in my hands, those are some of Supervision's new super granulating colors. I use the color blue, I think it's called Blue Brown and Devil's Kiss, I believe are the name of those colors. Maybe it's green brown. I'll list it in the video description for you to find out. But having, you can purchase individual colors if you think they would be beneficial to you in your artwork. But all I'm getting at is that you probably have some colors that will granulate already in your stash, and thoughtfully add to your palette where you feel that you have some missing spots. And that will make the most of your budget when you are watercoloring, and also it'll help you know your palette better and help you keep from getting confused. So I started off on dry paper, and then I ended up spraying it to get a misty effect, and I'm still adding colors while the paper is still damp. I like to get kind of a I don't like the look of just painting around something on dry paper because I feel like it gives it like a cut and pasted look, and I like my pictures to have a little bit more integration in them. So that's why I like to I like to work wet and wet first, and then I will let it dry, and then I'll put details on. Since these are sedimentary colors, they're heavy pigments and they don't tend to whoosh out of control. So your paint's pretty much going to stay where you put it as long as your brush isn't wetter than the surface of the paper. I kept to a very limited palette here. I used the burnt sienna and ultramarine blue to make my dark shadow color, and I'm going ahead with a number 8 round and just painting that right on my my paper here. And then I'm going to go in with a damp brush and just kind of spread that out. The brushes that I'm using here are from my set with Craft Ammo, and I also will use a mop brush later. But of course you can use whatever brushes you have on hand that do the trick for you. So I'm just softening that shadow out. Now, because again, they're sedimentary colors, they're very easy to lift and to blend out, so you don't have to worry about staining, which can be really it can be really good for a beginner painter to have that kind of a little bit of an undo button there, I think. That's why I think oftentimes your student grade paints are more liftable. I think it's also part of the, these are M-grams, so they're not student grade paint, but maybe you buy like a set of tubes by like Arteza or Reeves or, you know, one of the budget brands out there. And you'll notice that they lift really easily, or they all lift about the same rate. That can make it a little bit easier for beginners to get the hang of watercolor. It also doesn't flow quite as quickly, so it can also give beginners a little more time to work with it. Of course, there's a lot of cons with those budget paints as well, so you have to kind of see what you like and all of that. But sometimes it actually works out well for people. So, hey, use what you have, see how it works for you, and upgrade as needed, I guess would be my advice there. I'm putting in some of the detail for the boards on the boat using my liner brush. That is a long-haired skinny brush, and it carries a lot of paint. So that's what those liners are used for. If you have one of those in your stash and you're not quite sure what to do with them, they're great for doing ropes and long lines and boards, hair, things like that. And I'm just using that also to add in a little bit of detail on the ropes there. They were just kind of smushy from that first layer, so I like to go in now that the paper is dry and add, some of those little, definitions between where the ropes overlap and all of that. Now, one of my favorite things about painting nautical items is the weathering and the wear and tear, the, paint jobs that have been like repainted and, scuffed off and repainted, and like any sort of rust or rot or patina that could be on the boat. I think that is so fun to create in watercolor and in pencils and pastels, and it's just really fun to get those textures in there. So I'm having a lot of fun doing this kind of cruddy outside of the boat there. I just read the book The Cabin on the Lake, or The Cabin Across the Lake. Oh my gosh, I'm so bad with book names, but it was kind of a thriller. And there was this several scenes of a boat in the water, and this is kind of what it reminded me of, just this kind of eerie, misty lake and whatnot. And I also like to work back into the background and get some of the ripples back in that I see, so it's not so plain, because I was kind of feeling a lot of times that this felt just really plain, and anytime things got too defined, I would spritz it. Now that brush there is a Menta synthetic mop, and I'm using that to kind of lift and smudge out some areas and also scrub up some areas. So though that's a very inexpensive brush, I think you can find that for under $5 at arts and crafts stores. It's by Royal and Langnickel, and the Menta line is really nice because they have a watercolor line and a mixed media line, and then also like an oil line, but they're all completely animal-free brushes. So, and they do a good job. So if you like hog bristle brushes, but you don't like the fact that they are made from animal hair, you can get the Menta line and be reasonably pleased with that. And the price is really good. The price is very affordable, and the closest thing to those would be the Creative Mark Mimic Hog brushes, but they're quite a bit more expensive. So I was happy to find the line by Menta because it's so affordable, by Royal and Langnickel, the line Menta. When you're painting ropes kind of hanging off the edge, you want to keep in mind what they're hanging off from, how they would droop, and try to make them as natural and as logical as possible so that you can add some realism to the scene, and kind of, because if it doesn't seem like there's tension applied to these ropes at the right place, it's just going to feel a little awkward and unsettling. And while this is an eerie painting and we want it to be a little unsettling, that's not where you want the unsettling to come from. You don't want the unsettling vibes to come from poor draftsmanship. You want it to come from the mist and the just the eeriness of the scene. You can keep layering up, and if your brush is dry, you can get this dry brush texture, which also looks like wood grain or peeling paint. I was a little confused as to what this thing on the edge of the boat was, but I'm pretty sure it's an oarlock. So there wasn't a lot of great detail, even when I zoomed into the reference photo because of the mist. I couldn't get a lot of really great detail with it, but I did my best, and also imagining what it actually was because it wasn't very clear in the picture, and that's kind of how I came to that. You don't have to add colored pencils at the end of this if you don't want to. That's completely up to you. There's lots of ways to get lighter colors. You can scrub back. You can also scratch at the paper with an X-Acto knife if you want some like hairy textures on the ropes. So, you can always employ those ideas if you don't like the idea of mixing media. I love mixed media. I think it's a very efficient way to get the look you want on a painting, but I totally understand if you don't want to invest in those other supplies, or you just like the challenge of doing it from start to finish in watercolor. That's totally fine. So what I do when I'm going to work in colored pencils is I choose a few colors and I set them on a tray, and that way I don't have to spend all my time hunting through my big stash to find exactly what I want. So what I chose was a couple shades of like teal for the rope. I chose a black, a brown, a cream color, like a yellow ochre color, a white, and like a rusty reddish color. And really this is a pretty limited color painting, so I didn't want to start bringing in all kinds of crazy colors. And I'm using the white here to get that kind of white paint that's on the edge of the boat, and it looked a little harsh, so I went over with this sand color to tone it down a little bit, because it is old paint. It's not going to be super bright, but I did want to get that in there. And then also I put some of that reddish orangey color around the white to show like it's kind of been scuffed, and it's scuffed through a couple different coats of paint, so you can kind of see the teal and the red and the white kind of all together, where the boat has been naturally distressed by, it's a hard life on the water, I guess. And I just love getting those textures in. And I was able to use the brown and make some kind of crisscrossy, basically cross-hatching, going with the curve of the rope to get that round feeling and to bring in a little more texture. And it doesn't really matter what brand of pencils you use. I'm using a combination of Prismacolor and Holbein, mainly because they were close to hand in my color pencil rack next to my desk, but you could use any opaque wax-based pencil. I prefer a wax-based for mixed media because it is opaque, and they do show up a lot more on top of a painting. Now here I'm encountering a problem. Where I scrubbed out the mist, I have too level of a mist bank there. It almost looks like a cloud bank, and I don't like that. It needs to be broken up a little bit. And I'm going to attempt breaking that up with both pencils and paint, because it became apparent that it just looked too uniform, and it almost made the boat look like it was hovering on a cloud above the water, and that was not the look I was going for. So sometimes you need to let your painting rest and come back and evaluate it, because the old saying, hindsight is 20/20. So I actually left the painting alone for a bit, and then I looked at the photo I took of the painting, and that helped me more than anything. So whenever you're stuck, just snap a photo of your painting. Use your phone. That's really a really handy thing to do. And then look at the photo. And if there's a problem, if something's not right, it will generally show up. Or you can look at the painting in a mirror. But either way, that will give you a new way to look at it. And I need to break up that mist. So I went in with pencils and just tried to pull some of the colors from the boat back in over the mist. I figured this would be a good way to see if I was on the right track. And then I did go in with some paint because I was getting too much texture with a colored pencil, because I didn't want to press firmly because I didn't want to get too much color. So the texture of the cold pressed watercolor paper was making it very grainy, and that didn't give me the misty look that I wanted. So a couple of ways to overcome that would be to get like a clear blending pencil and like color firmly, or a more transparent color pencil. So if you have like a white pencil from a budget brand or an oil-based white pencil and it's just too translucent for your liking, that's where you would use it. You'd use it to blend out the more stronger colors when you want a more translucent look. So there's no bad there's no bad supplies. It's just, will the supply do what you want it to do? And now I'm going in and kind of brightening up some of the mist in different places so I can make it look more patchy and more realistic, rather than having that like basically floating on a cloud look that I had earlier. And it took took a few tries going back and forth. And now I actually went in with a pastel pencil in white because I knew I could blend out the chalk much better. And I just firmly blended it with my finger to kind of merge the chalk with some of the waxy layers and get that soft look I was after. And that's how I finished that painting. Again, if you'd like a real-time version of this, you can find it up in Critique Club. I'll have a link in the video description. Thank you for watching this, and please give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.